Today we're going to be learning Sefer Yehoshua, Parak Pasuk Gimel, and the main focus after we spend just a few minutes on the basic pasuk over here is going to be what is going on. Nowadays, when circumcision is done, typically do it with a knife, right? What's the story? When did that become the custom? And why was it that back then they were apparently doing it with stones, right? A special sharp stone. So what's going on over here? We're going to do a deep dive on this. Start with Pasuk Gimel over here. Vayaslo Yeshua Charvos Surim. Like as was discussed in the previous Pasuk, that Yeshua made for them Charvos Surim. Discuss exactly what this is in the previous Pasuk. This Charvos Surim business, sharp knives. Saw different explanations. Targum said, the Radak quoted it, Izmolin Charifin. This was the explanation of the Radak, just to remind ourselves from the previous Pasuk that this term of the Charos Surim is referring to Ismolin Charifin, which means sharp knives. That's how Targum renders the translation of these words. Anyways, Vayamal es bnei Israel, and he circumcised the Jews. El Givas Haralois. Where did he circumcise them? So the pasuk says it was at the hill of the foreskins. What is this talking about over here? So Rashi over here says, Al Shem HaMa'oiro Nikrosh Nasikim and Giva. There were so many foreskins, it was named after that place. It was almost like the hill of foreskins, so to say. It's basically what he did over here. That's the basic pasuk over here. Nothing else that really needs to be discussed. Let's take this time now to do a deep dive on this topic, aka the topic of the circumcision that's done, the mila. If it's going to be done with a knife or if it's going to be done with a stone. Now, according to the simple explanation of the pasuk, is that it's referring to stones, actually, which is very interesting because if we just go back over here, let's just again, that was according to Unclus, his explanation. Right? He said Charvosudim is referring to a knife. But if you take the actual word sor, okay, fix that. Surim, and then we see it again. Surim. A sor is a rock. Suri vigo ali. So the simple explanation, not coming on to Targum, is oh, actually, why do I need to go to the Radak? So silly. It says Ilmun Charifin over here. Right? Ismail Charifin. As we discussed last time, Ismail, the gematria of Aleph and Zayin, is 8. Azmal, then you should perform the Mila, aka on the 8th day. But the simple explanation is it's a rock. Sharp rock was to be used. So the question is why? And when did this change? That's the question that we need to deal with over here. Why did Hashem, in the simple explanation of this pasuk, command Yeshua to circumcise the people with stones? The commandment of circumcision had been practiced for many generations. Yeshua definitely knew how to do it. He didn't need any instructions. Furthermore, there's no requirement that it has to be done with stone. There's no halach in all of Hilchos Mila, and we don't do that nowadays. Nowhere do we find that Hashem told Avram to use a stone knife when he gave the commandment of Mila, of circumcision. There's a tradition that when Avram tried to circumcise himself, his hands were shaking, they were trembling because he was old. Hashem saw how much trouble he had, and he sent a scorpion to sting and circumcise him. This is alluded to in the pasuk that says Be'etzem ayoim hazen. The essence of that day, Be'etzem, stands for Ba'akitzos akrev sadik mal. In the stinging of a scorpion, the righteous person circumcised himself. This is wild idea over here. Such a tradition could not exist if there was a requirement that stone would be used. Circumcision may be performed with a knife of any material, as long as it will be a cut and safe cut, as long as the cut will be done safely and properly. Why then did Hashem command Yeshua to use stone? Why was Yeshua commanded to circumcise himself, as the pasuk says, "Make for yourself stone knives"? It would have been easier to appoint a qualified person. Why did he need to do the circumcision himself? Appoint a qualified Moel, someone who's qualified to do it, and divide the workload. Furthermore, why does the pasuk say in pasuk Beis circumcise the second time? So Maam Loez deals with all of this. And he explains someone who is circumcised once can't be circumcised again. Furthermore, the pasuk says that they hadn't been circumcised, so the words "a second time" seem out of place. This is another point that he says. Now, mila, circumcision, is one of the special commandments that belong to Yehoshua. Yehoshua circumcised the Jews before they left Egypt. In the merit of this deed and the Korban Pesach, they were redeemed. Even so, all 40 years in the desert, this commandment was not fulfilled. So Hashem told him, do it a second time. Since he carried out the circumcision once before, it was his privilege to do it this time also. Now, even though he was old, he was 99, and it would have been very difficult, Hashem wanted to do him alone. Because Hashem wanted to show what a precious commandment it is and how important it is for a father to look for someone who's God-fearing and qualified to circumcise his son. Mila is compared to bringing a korban. The person who holds the baby, he's like the mizbeach. The mohel is like the kohen. Before he performs the circumcision, he should purify himself by repenting for all of his sins. Since Yeshua had to circumcise so many people in one day, he had to be very well organized. Hashem therefore commanded him to prepare a lot of sharp stone knives, so that if one would become damaged, he would immediately be able to take another and continue. Prepare a lot for backup. They also had to be very sharp, so that it wouldn't be too painful. Now, this is much more important when the circumcision on an adult is being done, as opposed to a baby. Right? An adult you have to be very, very careful about. Because an infant, their sense of pain is not as well defined as an adult's. It won't hurt the baby as much. This is one reason why Hashem commanded us to circumcise at the age of 8 days rather than 13. A boy begins to perform the other commandments at 13, but Hashem commanded he should be circumcised 8 days. Why? So it won't be as painful. This we discussed last time. A lot of reasons why the Mila specifically on the 8th day. This is kind of within the medical reason that we discussed over there towards the end. Now a boy begins, so that's the idea over here. Now some say that it's actually better to circumcise with a stone rather than metal. A cut that is made with stone is said to heal quicker. It's also referred because circumcision is compared to bringing a korban. And when it comes to the mizbeach or a korban, it's prohibited to bring iron or metal on the mizbeach. So too, it shouldn't be used for circumcision as well. So this is the idea over here. Because a knife is metal. The mizbeach gives long life. Korbanos that are brought on the mizbeach atone for a person's sins, and he's saved from an untimely death. Whereas metal iron shortens a person's life. Iron is the material of which weapons are made. It would not be proper that it be permitted to touch the mizbeach. So too circumcising with iron, we have to be careful to avoid that. We find that Zipporah, Moshe's wife, used a stone to circumcise their son. Therefore, on the special occasion of the circumcision for all the Jewish people, Hashem commanded Yehoshua to use a stone instead of iron. It was also to remind them that they were descendants of Avram, as the pasuk in Yeshaya says, "Look towards the stone This is in Yeshaya. You can look it up if you want to. Nun Aleph Aleph. This is referring to Avram. He was barren like a stone until Hashem gave him a bracha, a blessing, and he was going to be able to have children. Right? Now, at all other times, however, circumcision, it could be done with any other material, even iron. The pasuk indicates yourself. Hashem commanded Yehoshua, make for yourself stone knives. Only Yehoshua had to make the knives out of stone. But in the future, to make the knives out of stone, only Yehoshua, but in the future, it could be made out of anything. And before we continue, let's just focus on this one point over here in regards to the Mizbeach, how the altar in the base of Mikdash lengthens a person's life, and the metal shortens a person's life. There's a halacha that's brought down not to leave a knife on the table during benching, because the table is similar to Mizbeach. It says at the end of Maseches Chagiga Brachos, it's a few places in the Gemara that not to leave a knife on the table during benching. It's actually discussed multiple reasons. It comes up in the Shulchan Aruch, a whole different discussion of itself. Shabbos and Yontif is fine; it's an exception. But anyways, interesting discussion. It's in Siman Kuf Pei, if I'm not mistaken, towards the end of the Siman. And yeah, we discussed it. We discussed it in the past about this idea. We discussed also in Siman Kuf Samach Vav 167, recording JaveBlan.com, under the Halacha and Mishnah Berurah section, how one should be careful not to do things that are inappropriate on the table that he eats at, because the table that he eats at is similar to the Mizbeach. Shouldn't kill bugs on it. You don't put a baby on a table. Let them sit there, etc. Other halachas. Continue over here. Take a look at the Mesilas HaNaviim. That's what we're going to do over here now. Screen share. Rabbi Yamin Eisenberger. He says that Rashi explains sharp. Okay. He says, look at the Aruch HaShulchan. In your Deya, it's in Reish Samach Daled, Os Tezvav, says that this is over here a source for what the Rambam says. The Rambam in Hilchos Mila Perek Beis says that it's a mitzvah nemuchar lamul babarzel. It's preferable to use metal to perform the circumcision with. V'nagu kol Yisrael b'sakin. And the custom among all Jews is to use a knife. And the fact that Hashem commanded Yehoshua to use barzel, metal, charvos surim, right? According to Onkelos was meant a sharp knife. So it implies that that's the main mitzvah. Also, the Chassam Sofer says perhaps based on this pasuk as well. Use metal specifically. The Malbim quotes the Medrash who explains surim is avonim, is rocks. Malbim quotes the Bereshis Rabbah in Lamed Aleph Ches, who says that this is rocks. We find by Shmos Daler Chafei V'tikach Sipora Sur. Sipora took a rock, a sharp rock, and cut the foreskin of her son. What's the reason? Why were rocks used and not metal? Because they were pure at that time, and they were able to bring the Korban Pesach, the Pesach sacrifice. Now, the problem is that something metal or something like a sword is going to be more of a problem in terms of from being tuma, being tame, impure, and it can make a person impure and lead to problems. So therefore, specifically a rock. Rock doesn't receive tuma, doesn't become impure. The Mishvah Zozavi quotes the Shilos and Chuvas Imri Yoshir Chelik Beis and Kuf Samach Vav, who was concerned that the metal will not make Yeshua, who is the Moel, impure. The end he says, had it not been for the Malbim, I would say more obviously that the Prisha in Yoredeya, Min Reisha Machdalad Os Vav writes, the reason why it's preferable to use metal is based on the Medrash that relates that Hashem promised metal on the day when the incident with the metal hat happened, that the metal would get repaid. Goliath, he was wearing a metal hat when David HaMelech killed him. Famous story in Tanakh, probably one of the most well-known. They call it the David and Goliath battle. David and Goliath. So he was wearing a metal helmet. So Hashem said, I'll repay you metal. So according to this, we have a different source for mila with the metal knife, not like what the Aruch HaShulchan was saying. It was on that day when that episode happened, that event happened, that historic event. So it was only from that event when Goliath fell and when the helmet, the rock came through and it penetrated and it killed the giant. That's when it came the custom to use metal for mila. For circumcision over beforehand. Circumcision with the sharp rock was very common. And that's why both Yehoshua and Sipporah did not use metal, but rather that they used the rock. Deep idea over there. Incredible amount of insight. Sam Sefer is a side point. And his commentary to Masechah Shabbos on Kuf Lamed Daled Beis explains why Sipporah used a rock to perform mila. A wound from metal can be dangerous. See the Shulchan Aruch. It's in Reish Kaf Ches Sif Zayin. Therefore, she used a rock in order that it wouldn't be dangerous when she was traveling. Less dangerous when they travel. Now, the that's the idea over there. All right. If a Torah discusses older people recover slower from metal wounds. Beautiful explanation over there. So, anyways, this is the Mesilas HaNaviim, the insight. Should be pointed out that the Shulchan Aruch in Yordei and Hilchos Mila, it's in Reisha Machdaled Sif Beis, says that one could perform the mitzvah of Mila with any type of instrument. I'll open it up for you. This is a direct quote from the Shulchan Aruch and Hilchos Mila over here. It's exactly what we're learning about right now. The Kol Malin, Reisha Machdaled Sif Beis. You can perform Mila with anything. Here it is. I don't know if you can see the words, but Kol Malin. You can perform Mila with anything. Va'afilu b'tzur u'b'zechuchas. Even with a rock and with glass. U'b'kol davar hakairis. With anything that cuts. Chutz, except for Mikramana shalkana lafish v'kesam and mitazmim and yavoli dekar shifchokai. Something if it's going to lead to sparks coming out, you don't want to use that. U'mitzim in a mufar, it's preferable. Lamul b'barzel, to use metal. Beim besakin, beim misparim, whether it's a knife or whether it's scissors. Nagula mul besakin, but the custom is to use a knife to perform the mila. It's actually very interesting because on the actual page itself of the Shulchan Aruch, there is no one that comments on this. It's pretty unusual to have a sif in Shulchan Aruch that no one comments on it. And this is the Prisha over here in Osvav. He discusses over here. Oh, make that Ozayan rather. Shamati tam al pia midrash shakach huftach lebarzel biyom shenikva koivish al barzel. Shai brosh shal galis of David. That's why. It all has to do with the episode with David and Goliath. So from that time and on, that's when it became the custom to use metal. Everything switched after that battle. What a tremendous insight that very few people actually know about. Hmm. Well, it's a good thing that I caught that because I had in my notes it was Osvav in the Prisha and it's really Ozayan. That's why I'm doing this again. Why does the pasuk use the word Vashov? You should return again in the second pasuk. When did they previously perform mila? Rashi explains. Many people performed mila the night when they left Egypt. So it was already done. Right. Matsudas David quotes the Bamidbar Rabbah in Yud Aleph Vav, which relates that every Jew performed mila on the night when they left Egypt. Rashi quotes an alternative explanation provided by Chazal. The word Vashov refers to the Priya's mila, the Priya, which wasn't given to Avram. What is Priya? Mamlois explains over here exactly what the Priya is. This is the next section that we're going to be talking about over here. It's a new halacha that was added, a new law that was added to the commandment of circumcision on that day. This is the law that says that after cutting off the foreskin, the membrane that lies beneath it must be pushed back. This was not part of the original commandment that Hashem gave Avram. He was only required to cut off the foreskin itself. It was also not done when the Jews were circumcised in Egypt, but from that day on, it would be required to push back the membrane the membrane after cutting the foreskin. No circumcision would be considered complete if this was not done. According to this, there were some Jews that Yehoshua had to take care of who were already circumcised. Right? Among the Jews that Yehoshua circumcised, there were some who had already been circumcised in Egypt. They were the men who were less than 20 years old when they left Egypt, and therefore they weren't included in the decree of dying in the desert. By this time, they were between 40 and 60 years. You just do the math. Their circumcisions now became invalid. It was a mila psula lemafreya. It became a retroactive, invalid circumcision. Since the membrane wasn't pushed back, there was no priya. After Yeshua finished circumcising the younger men, he proceeded to circumcise these men again by pushing back their membranes, aka performing a proper priya. The pasuk therefore states to circumcise the Jews a second time. Even those who were circumcised already had to be circumcised again. Don't wonder and say, how is it possible for a new commandment to have been given to Yeshua? The entire Torah was revealed to Moshe. Nothing would ever be added by any future prophet. Hashem would not even reveal to Yeshua the laws that he had learned from Moshe, but had forgotten. How then could he have revealed this new halacha, this new law of Priya, of pushing back the membrane? Rather, we have to conclude that this halacha of Priya was already revealed to Moshe. He already taught it to the Jews in the desert. But until now, it had never actually been performed. Why? They were exempt from the commandment of circumcision during the 40 years when they were in the desert. When they were in the desert during those 40 years. There'd never been a chance to fulfill this new commandment. Therefore, when Hashem spoke to Yeshua, he was telling him, perform it for the first time. Use the word said. So therefore, the Priya couldn't be performed in the desert because it was too dangerous. Now, Ma'amois explains that the righteous king, Agrippas, once asked Rabbi Eliezer, why is the commandment of circumcision not included in the Ten Commandments? If it is indeed so precious in Hashem's eyes, why did he leave it out over here? Rabbi Eliezer answered, circumcision precedes the Ten Commandments. Before Hashem revealed himself to the Jews on Mount Sinai, he gave them the Torah. He said to them, if you will listen, to my voice and keep my covenant, you will be my chosen people. The words keep my covenant refer to the covenant of circumcision. Only if they would keep the covenant of circumcision would they be worthy of hearing Hashem's voice and receive the Torah. Circumcision is a sign that a master, it's like a sign that a master brands on his slave. It indicates that a person has accepted Hashem as his master. Until a person accepts Hashem as his master, there's no point in Hashem giving him any commandments. He has not yet accepted Hashem's authority. He feels free to reject any commandments that he doesn't like because he's not branded. Since he reserves the right to reject commandments, even those that he chooses to keep, he doesn't keep because Hashem commanded him, but rather because he himself considers them good. He's not really obeying any of Hashem's commandment. He's just accepting some of Hashem's suggestions. He's not fit to receive the Torah. Only Jews who are able to learn and understand the wisdom of the Torah because they are circumcised and accept Hashem's will as their king and master are fitting to receive the Torah. That's the idea over here. Just a few other interesting points. Bamidbar Rabbah and Yud Zayin Aleph, as well as the Tanchuma, Shlach Yidal, it says that just like a father is obligated to perform circumcision for the son, so too Hashem for the Jews. He circumcised them through Yehoshua. Shnemar this pasuk Aselach Achar Vasurim. Zohar Chilek Aleph Sadi Gimel Mebeis says, why did they need to do this before they went into Israel? Meaning the circumcision, because the whole world only endures because of the circumcision. That's the idea over here. Okay, those are a few insights on this pasuk. Next time we will continue.